Abortion in America. Following the overturning of Roe v. Wade, President Joe Biden wants to end a long-standing Senate provision. We're at the White House. Targeting the faithful. A security camera captures disturbing images of vandalism against a Catholic church in Washington state. Not exactly pumped up. A closer look at how the price of gas may impact Independence Day travel in the United States. And the beauty of Mass. The Holy Father shares new guidance for our celebration of the sacred mysteries. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, June 30th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of the first martyrs of the Church of Rome. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden seeks a controversial change in the Senate, one that would be highly unlikely to make abortion legal across the United States. Democrats are also pressuring the president to take executive action. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
Good evening, Tracy. After nearly a week traveling overseas, President Joe Biden will spend this evening back here at the White House. But first, he made news today at the end of the NATO Summit in Spain when he revealed his plan for more access to abortions. President Joe Biden says the Supreme Court has thrust a serious problem upon the United States.
The one thing that has been destabilizing is the outrageous behavior of the Supreme Court of the United States on overruling not only Roe v. Wade, but essentially challenging the right to privacy.
The president wants the U.S. House and Senate to legalize abortions across America.
I believe we have to codify Roe v. Wade in the law, and the way to do that is to make sure the Congress votes to do that. And if the filibuster gets in the way, it's like voting rights. It should be, we provide an exception for this.
But President Biden's plan to change Senate rules does not even have support from two members of his own party. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin earlier said allowing one party to exert complete control in the Senate with only a simple majority will only pour fuel onto the fire of political whiplash and dysfunction that is tearing this nation apart. And Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema earlier wrote, "My support for retaining the 60-vote threshold is not based on the importance of any particular policy. It is based on what is best for our democracy. The filibuster compels moderation and helps protect the country from wild swings between opposing policy poles." The president also defended his record on inflation as his approval rating in the U.S. sinks to new lows.
America's better positioned to lead the world than we ever have been. We have the strongest economy in the world. Our inflation rates are lower than other nations in the world.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said attacking the Supreme Court from the world stage is below the dignity of the president. Meanwhile, President Biden said he'll meet with governors tomorrow to discuss abortion, and he'll have more announcements to make then. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the White House wins a case and loses one at the Supreme Court today. The justices upheld the suspension of a Trump-era immigration policy known as Remain in Mexico. The measure forced those seeking asylum in the United States to wait in Mexico while their cases were considered. But the justices also delivered a blow to the Biden administration. They curtailed a measure on how to regulate emissions from power plants. The ruling is seen as a setback to the administration's environmental agenda. Also at the Supreme Court today, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was officially sworn in during a noontime ceremony. The court's first black female justice succeeds the retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. A new video has emerged of an attack against a Catholic church in Washington state. Smashed windows and pro-abortion graffiti damaged St. Louise Catholic Church in Bellevue earlier this week. The attacker also cursed at a woman who was praying in the church's adoration chapel. The masked assailant also sprayed paint on the parish's administrator. And joining us now to talk more about this is Joe Bukuras, staff writer for Catholic News Agency. Joe, welcome back. Great to see you. I know you've been following this. Tell us a little bit more about this incident. The video is really jarring.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So the video, I mean, you can't put words to it. It's just pure violence, pure anger. You know, I just got my hands on a court document from the Kings County prosecutor's office, and it says that they identified the person, the attacker, who was arrested, the name Maeve Notre. And this person ran away from the scene. Police, after they were called, they approached Maeve, and Maeve began charging the police car and began hitting the police car. Eventually, the court document says she was arrested and put into hospital, sedated, and the charges are supposed to be brought tomorrow. That's looking like it's going to be charged with a hate crime. So that's just pure violence. I mean, there was spray paint everywhere, statues defaced. I think it was around $10,000 in damages that the church is going to have to come up with. So, yeah, really sad situation there.
It's really awful. I know you talked to those at the church. What did they have to say?
You know, they were sad. I was talking to the pastor, Father Gary, there, and he was telling me that he got a phone call. It's his day off. He gets a phone call from this woman who's saying, you know, Father Gary, there's someone in the church. They were screaming at me. They were swearing, and this woman, as she's on the phone, is hiding in behind a piano in the adoration chapel, scared for her life, he said. And he rushes over to the church. He finds her outside. She's just shaken. And the parish, I guess they have a counselor there too, who came and met with her, coincidentally, by the time he got there. And they were just trying to calm her down, but she was traumatized. I mean, not only was she attacked with words, but the parish administrator was physically attacked. Maeve allegedly spray painted him with spray paint on the cheek there. So before Maeve fled. So it's just a terrible situation there. I know the pastor said that he was really disheartened to see it, but you know, he said although they were attacked with rocks, that Jesus Christ is their rock, and they're not going to be moved by this. Yeah,
so wonderful to hear that, but really a scary situation. In West Virginia, something else very jarring. St. Coleman Catholic Church, it was burned to the ground, and it was also a historic site. Joe, tell us more about what happened there. So sad.
Yeah, so it happened on Sunday, and the local volunteer fire department was called. They heard there was a fire there, so they went over, and the thing was just gone by the time they got there. And other fire departments from the area came as well, and they're investigating that. The local fire marshal is, and the state police responded as well. I mean, it was just a historic, little cute church. I mean, it served an Irish community, an immigrant community a long time ago in the 1800s, and that church really was a spiritual rock for that community during that time. It was obviously very Catholic, very religious community. And I'm sure, you know, they'd be heartbroken to see it burn down today because it served so many people. And I know the people today who have ancestors who use that church are so heartbroken. We talked to one, and she said that, you know, she's just really hurt to see that it's gone. They left that church open all the time just to let people walk inside and see it and take in the history. And yeah, just a tragedy to see all these churches being attacked, and especially St. Coleman's. What a gem it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an incredible loss. You know, we're approaching the 1 week mark since Roe has been overturned. What do you think the atmosphere is right now in the pro-abortion movement? Have we seen an increase in violence and damages to churches and pregnancy centers since last Friday? What are you seeing, Joe?
Yeah, well, I know we were tracking it since the leak in May. The leak, obviously, Dobbs v. Jackson was leaked May 2nd, I believe it was, and we were seeing a lot of attacks. I mean, I think we were averaging around one a day, you know, and now, I mean, this is the most I've ever seen personally. I think between Friday is when Roe was overturned and today, I think I've tracked about 18 vandalisms, either churches or pro-life pregnancy centers. So, I mean, that is a high rate of attacks in a short amount of time. So, you know, is this going to slow down by next week, by next month? I'm not sure, but I know this is the most violence that I've ever seen personally.
It's so awful. Joe, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your reporting and staying on this. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And for more on this story and more, plus an interactive map detailing which U.S. states have banned abortion, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Lawmakers in California approve a budget that includes money for abortion. The $308 billion measure will fund abortions for women who say they can't afford them. Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom is expected to sign the bill. Well, the Archdiocese of San Antonio is holding a memorial mass tonight for the more than 50 migrants who died in an abandoned tractor trailer. Archbishop Gustavo Garcia Siller will preside at the liturgy to pray for the 53 people who died earlier this week and for the survivors. A makeshift memorial now marks the site where the abandoned tractor trailer was found. 4 people are charged in the case. Coming up, How a gas tax holiday may or may not deter plans for 4th of July travel. And China's leader leaves his country for the first time in more than 2 years. We'll explain. As people in the United States know all too well, gas prices these days are extremely high. According to AAA, the national average price is now around $4.86 a gallon. President Joe Biden has asked Congress to suspend the federal gas tax for 3 months. But as Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports, the move isn't getting a very warm reception, even from his own party.
The idea of President Biden suspending the gas tax is receiving a very cold reaction up here on Capitol Hill, not just from Republicans, but Democrats alike. Congressional Democrats tell me that they have a number of concerns of suspending the 18 cents a gallon, and they believe that it's the wrong direction.
I believe the most important thing we can do to lower gas prices is crack down on big oil's manipulation of the oil markets.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he wants a bill passed to set a 21% surtax on oil company profits over $1 billion, while Republicans say a gas tax holiday isn't the answer.
What the administration, of course, is coming up with is yet another gimmick, another Band-Aid, and something they know is dead on arrival up here in Congress. The president knows it. Democrats know it up here.
That gas tax is what's used to fix potholes in the road and things like that. So the American people are not only going to have to pay a lot for gas, they're going to be driving on roads that are probably going to have a lot of potholes now as a result of this.
Instead, Republicans tell me the U.S. can be energy independent like it was during the Trump administration.
He can fix this, allow drilling on federal lands safely, allow permits safely, open up a Keystone Pipeline. I mean, you can do all these things safely. We do it here.
He is trying to stamp out the oil industry. That is wrong, wrong, wrong. We cannot depend on alternative fuels.
Congressman James Comer tells me recently in the House Oversight Committee, gas company CEOs testified that the Biden administration told them to cut production.
Now we have Joe Biden begging them to increase production, and now we have him going to Saudi Arabia in a desperate attempt to try to get more foreign production of oil when we could do it here in the United States with good paying American jobs.
Some Democrats told me that even if Congress did suspend the gas tax, Americans would be outraged when it came time to restore it due to the rising costs of food and other supplies. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
And joining us now to discuss is Paul Dykowitz, editor and columnist at StockInvestor.com and author of Holy Smokes, Golden Guidance from Notre Dame's Championship Chaplain. Paul, welcome back. Great to see you again. A lot to talk about today, but first, I want to get your thoughts on a possible gas tax holiday and how much of an impact do you think it will have?
I was reading that one professor from Harvard University thought it could help perhaps cut 10 cents per gallon. So for folks who are living paycheck to paycheck, that may make a difference. For a lot of Americans, that won't make a discernible difference. It's an effort to try to do something within his control. His party does have the majority in the Congress. However, as your reporter indicated, there is not great support for this to happen, and he may not get enough votes even among his own party to allow it to go forward. So I would think that the benefit of it, which was really to cut about 18.4 cents per gallon off regular gasoline and about 24.4 cents per gallon from diesel, would not make a substantial difference for most people. The problem is it'll be borrowing money that would otherwise be going to the federal highway trust fund. And that fixes roads and bridges and things of that nature. And there's been a great interest in a bipartisan nature about trying to repair the infrastructure upon which we drive. So there is going to be something to be given up. And I don't know whether it's going to be short term or long term. It was proposed for 3 months. But whether it can actually get passed is another question. So there could be some marginal benefits. I know it's an effort for the president to want to do something when people are asking him to take action, but I'm not really sure it'll make a discernible difference for most of us.
Yeah, and as you know, of course, the 4th of July holiday is nearly upon us, and no doubt many people will be hitting the roads. Paul, how do you think the high gas prices will impact travel, if at all?
Well, I think a lot of people feel pent-up need to go out and socialize and to do things after 2 years of lockdowns from the COVID-19 crisis. The problem becomes for people who are really struggling financially. I think some of those folks may make sacrifices or curtail, the trips that they'll take or go shorter distances while still wanting to celebrate the holiday. So I would think it would have somewhat of an impact, but not substantial. The other thing is that air travel also is coming back. If people can get the flights, because there's a less of an availability of pilots, for example. So there have been some cancellations of flights. There were some buyouts that took place during the pandemic that led to senior people getting packages financially to go ahead and leave. And now there's a need to try to bring back some of that important labor from flight attendants to pilots. So there's perhaps a lack of crews right now available to fulfill the demand. And so consequently, I think there will be somewhat of a elasticity of demand issue that basically it's for things that you can have as a discretionary expense, unlike the staples for food that you would really need just to continue to sustain yourself.
Yeah, we only have about a minute left or so, but I want to kind of jump off of that. You mentioned food. That's also going up this July 4th holiday. It's estimated that the average price for a holiday cookout is going to cost about $10 more this year than it did last year. I want to get your reaction to that, and also how the rise in grocery prices is impacting American families overall.
Well, it's definitely something to consider, and I know when I go to the store, I'll take into account what the pricing of things are. And I'm sure most of us do too. I would think many people would continue to splurge for the holiday and not want to shortchange family and friends who will be celebrating with them. But I would think going forward, it's going to have more of an impact. We're a bit insulated from the famine problem that's occurring because of the restriction of grain exports from Ukraine and also from Russia, with Putin trying to put more pressure on other countries to remove the economic sanctions that were targeting his efforts to basically invade Ukraine and to continue to decimate that country and bomb, residential areas, churches, hospitals, you name it, from the civilian side. So it's going to have somewhat of an impact, but I don't think it'll stop people from celebrating.
Yeah, and Paul, really quickly, not a whole lot of time left, as you know, but just curious, a lot of people are talking about this. I believe we talked about this before. Where do you see us right now as far as our economic status? Are we in a recession?
It's difficult to say, because a recession by definition is 2 consecutive quarters of economic decline. So to find out if we're in a recession, to meet that definition, you have to have basically a recession already occurring for 6 months. So consequently, it's always hard to tell in the midst of it. I think we're having smaller growth. I don't think we're necessarily in a recession now. The good thing is employment is still strong. The Fed is going to will raise interest rates further to help reduce inflation, and that could weaken the economy in the months ahead. So even though we might not be in a recession now, we've got more concerns in the future. And as I said when you interviewed me last time about heading into an economic Lent that would last beyond Lent, this could also go into next Lent. So I think we're going to see slower growth than we've had probably pretty much for the next year, with the interest rate that the Fed is going to continue to cut, perhaps even 0.75% in July, just a month from now.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it right there. So much more we could talk about. Paul, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, Germany's government wants to streamline the process for transgender people to change their name and gender on official documents. The proposed new law would also allow minors as young as age 14 to alter personal information without parental approval. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has been sworn in as the 17th president of the Philippines.
Ay mataimtim na nanunumpa. Ay taimtim na nanunumpa.
In his inaugural speech, Marcos defended the legacy of his late father, who was overthrown in 1986. He also issued a call for unity in the majority Catholic country. He replaces former President Rodrigo Duterte. While China's president is in Hong Kong ahead of the 25th anniversary of its return to Beijing from Britain. Supporters waved the flags of China and Hong Kong at a train station and chanted, "Welcome, welcome, warm welcome," as Xi Jinping arrived. Later in the day, China's president praised Hong Kong's outgoing chief executive Carrie Lam for her service. It was the first time China's leader left his country in more than 2 years. Up next, analysis of the Holy Father's new letter regarding the celebration of the Mass. Hundreds of men gathered in Mexico City late last week to pray the Rosary. It was part of the Men's Rosary, an international movement that began in Poland. At the end of the event in Mexico City, several people shouted, "Long live Christ the King." Finally tonight, Pope Francis invites the church to rediscover, quote, "the power and the truth of the Christian celebration." In a 15-page letter released yesterday, the Holy Father said in part he wants the beauty of the Christian celebration to not be spoiled. The Pope's message was released to coincide with the solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul. Joining us now from Rome is Andreas Thonhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Andreas, great to see you. Before talking about this apostolic letter, yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi received Holy Communion at Mass with Pope Francis at the Vatican, something we did talk about yesterday. That said, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Yesterday, we celebrated an important Roman and Vatican feast day. Quite unexpectedly, it saw the co-occurrence of two remarkable events. U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi received the Eucharist in St. Peter's during a papal mass despite being prominently banned from receiving it in her home diocese, and Pope Francis published an explanatory letter on his motu proprio from last year, the new rules issued regarding traditional Mass, which stirred quite some controversy. Well, let's start with Nancy Pelosi. While speaking at the U.S. Embassy's 4th of July reception and awarding U.S. State Department support to the Italian Sant'Egidio community for their work with the homeless, Pelosi made sure to stop by St. Peter's and attend a papal Mass. Her reasoning for doing so remains open, but it comes amid strong condemnations from her and other leading Democrats of the recent Roe V. Wade overturn by the U.S. Supreme Court. She intensified her rhetoric, calling for abortion to be decriminalized across the states. And this clear anti-life stance brought the bishop of her home diocese of San Francisco, Archbishop Corleone, to request her to not receive communion. Tracy, Nancy Pelosi did meet the Pope briefly before Mass, but did not receive the Eucharist from him. She participated at Mass amongst other diplomats and received it from a randomly chosen priest sent to administer the Eucharist to the diplomatic corps seatings. Matteo Bruni, the Vatican spokesperson, who I spoke to briefly today, did not want to comment on this. And this is not unusual, as Pelosi's participation in Mass was private in nature and not official. Still, the world press reported on it, and there is now a certain sense that the Vatican would approve of Pelosi's or even President Biden's stance on abortion. But clearly, this is not the case.
I'm curious, Andreas, how is the letter? How's that related to Nancy Pelosi?
So the letter is called Desiderio Desideravi. This is the Latin opening of Luke 22:15, meaning, "I have ardently desired." In the letter, Pope Francis reiterates how important the celebration of the Eucharist is for the life of the Church. The Holy Father writes that we should not overemphasize the correctness of celebration and at the same time not banalize it. With his letter, he simply wants to invite the whole Church to, and I quote, "rediscover, to safeguard, and to live the truth and power of the Christian celebration, and not to be exploited in service of some ideological vision, no matter what the hue," he writes.
So, Andreas, is the new letter, is it meant to calm the waves that the new rules on the traditional Mass caused?
It might be meant as a clarification and also a step towards those who felt misunderstood and left alone with the new rules and Latin Mass. Recently, Pope Francis called this group the Restorers and explicitly mentioned the U.S. as their geographical focal point. The letter does not soften the blow for those who have a special relationship with the traditional Latin Mass. In 15 pages, Pope Francis explains why there should only be one liturgy, namely the liturgy suggested by the Second Vatican Council. I quote, "We cannot go back to the ritual form which the Council Fathers cum Petro et sub Petro felt the need to reform." Pope Francis writes at the end of his letter. In the final paragraph, he concludes, Let us abandon our polemics to listen together to what the Spirit is saying to the Church.
Well, Andreas, thank you so much for that report. We appreciate it. Andreas Thonhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Thank you again. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.